Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Kings of the Heart, the Kings of the Heart podcast. My name is Tyreek Omari Walton, and usually I am joined by my brother and my partner in crime, Dr. John Hart, but Dr. Hart right now is not feeling too well. We wish him the best. Can't wait to have him back here on Kings of the Heart with us. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce what we now call the Royal Cypher. Yes, we have gone from the Cypher 3 to officially the Royal Cypher. Why? Because not only are we joined by the one and only Miss Weena Wise, Miss Wise. Hello, hello.
Hey, hey, hey.
We have Miss Weena Wise here, and we also are now joined by Miss Anisha Prasad. Hello, hello.
Hello. So happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. We are also recording this, and we are trying to make sure that we are getting everything in here correctly. So bear with us. I am still learning how to do all this, and for some reason, none of it is working right now. Okay, there we go. We got a little something right there. So anyway, like we said, this is the Kings of the Heart podcast, joined by Weena Wise and Nisha Prasad. We are also the Royal Cypher, and here we go, just trying something new, and I hope you guys enjoy what we're doing here. So first, let's start off just by saying what is going on, guys. It's been a while since we've seen each other. Miss Weena, how you been?
I have been well. I've been missing Kings of the Heart. You all have been on summer break, and I've just got the vapors. I'm back. It's exciting.
It's exciting to have you back here, and we've had her as a guest several times, but she is a friend, she is a colleague. Anisha Prasad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Like, it's a glorious fall day, so it all feels good.
Yeah, it's beautiful outside. So hopefully we'll get you out there after we get done doing this. So anyway, so as we typically do, Kings of the Heart podcast, we like to talk about all things relationship focused. You know, we're all licensed clinical marriage and family therapists. We all have fantastic training. You got two of the best over here, people who trained me basically in the house today. And so if you like what I do, you're definitely gonna like what they do. So we talk a lot about relationships from many different aspects. We want to make sure we do a lot of psychoeducation, give you a lot of background into how to do things better in your relationship, not just, you know, random conversations, but like what's really going on and how can you do things better in your relationship. And today we wanted to get into how do you actually manage relationships when you're dating someone who either has diagnosed or maybe even undiagnosed personality disorders.
Ooh, what
Right?
a heavy but relevant topic.
I know. I mean, you have a lot of people who will say, well, you know, my mate's a narcissist or they are bipolar, blah, 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 and not really know what that means. So we want to get more into some of the actual DSM-5 you know, personality disorders, not just what people think they may be, but what they really, really are.
Tyree, you're going to make us work today,
Oh
showing
yeah.
that we have some clinical degrees, huh?
Yep.
It's
So,
all
like
good.
I
We're
said,
here for it.
we have great training. So right now you have to make sure that you're using that training.
Yeah.
Amen.
All right. So let's start off. So typically when I think about personality disorders, I go right to what we say is cluster B, personality disorders within the DSM-5. And the reason why I do that, it seems like there are so many people, and maybe I could be wrong, but I run across a number of different people who seem to can be categorized within that area. But you have cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. And there may be some other ones in cluster C that we will get to as well. But the ones that come to mind for me specifically are the borderline personality disorder,
Check.
antisocial disorder,
Check.
personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder,
Check.
and why am I forgetting one more?
Narcissistic.
Narcissistic. How did I
How
just
can you
say that one? How
forget
did I
that
forget that
one?
one?
That's
That's
the
the big
one
one,
that
right?
people mostly, that's the one right now. It's getting a lot of attention. But
A lot.
Tariq, I'm wondering if we can kind of go back a second and even just talk about what a personality disorder is,
Okay, let's do
as
that.
opposed to just kind of another like mood disorder or something
Right,
like that.
right.
So how would you? I think when I think of personality disorders, it's a pattern, like it's long standing, usually kind of emerges in childhood. Like you see symptom, and it doesn't matter what the relationship, what the circumstance, like this is this person's view of the world, their interaction with the world, like it's just consistent.
Right. Right.
And the fact that it impairs their functioning in daily life and also impairs their relationships, which is what we're here to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think most notably in the cluster B, like you're talking about, and for our listeners, cluster B, we're talking about, like as Tariq said, in the DSM-5, which is like our manual.
For
That's
diagnosing.
how it's outlined.
Mhm.
And so in the cluster B disorders, personality disorders, it's marked by real poor emotional regulation,
Right.
like they just really struggle with relationships, and I think that's why, we're choosing to focus on those.
Yeah. What do you think, Bina?
Yeah, that emotional roller coaster is one of the biggest factors that make it difficult for loved ones and romantic partners to stand by. So it's important for us to talk about some of the things that romantic partners may encounter, and I suspect that we'll get into how you can manage being with someone, or if you should continue to manage
Mm,
being with someone.
Yeah, that's a very
mhm,
important point because there are reasons sometimes that you may not be able to manage well and you may want to find your way out. And I also want to say that part of the reason why we're having this discussion is because on the tail end of Domestic Violence Month, Awareness Month,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
I think it's good to have a conversation around these different personality disorders because as the people who are involved with people who are having these kind of troubles, it can feel very abrasive, it can feel very abusive, it can feel contentious. It just feels like whatever they're going through, they're taking out on us. And
yeah,
Yes,
it can really, really be hurtful to us, right?
yeah,
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I
So
think,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, like, I think one of the challenges of dealing with a personality disorder is the person oftentimes doesn't see it that way. They don't
right.
Right.
recognize
Right.
it so much for themselves because it has been persistent. This is just their way of interacting with the world. They don't necessarily see it as a problem.
Right.
I want to throw in here also this factor of comorbidity because often
Yeah.
um, substance abuse, let me call it drinking, smoking, taking drugs, is a way that undiagnosed and diagnosed people self medicate to cope with some of the symptoms. And when you're undiagnosed and you really don't know what it is that's occurring inside of you emotionally and mentally that's throwing you off balance, you simply know that something's wrong and it can be painful and cause great suffering. So, learning to drink, learning to smoke to relieve some of those feelings and to stabilize you temporarily is something that people get into. And you won't often see that connection if the disorder is not diagnosed.
Mhm.
So your partner may see you smoking too much, drinking too much. That also plays into the violence. But the saddest part is that when you use the alcohol or the substances, it can exacerbate the problem.
Very much so.
So you can become even more depressed, though you are trying to alleviate the symptoms of the depression.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that, in terms of the segment of the population that actually has a diagnosable personality disorder, is relatively small. It's only about 9 to 10%. But among substance abuse, people who seek treatment, in treatment, about closer to like 85, 90% the people in treatment, meaning they have severe and significant enough addiction that they're in treatment, it's about 85 to 90% who also have a personality disorder. So in
Right.
addition to the addiction, like you said, the comorbidity, both of these things are coming together. And sometimes the focus is just on the addiction. Like
That's
that's
right.
it's all the focus. They're maybe legally involved, drinking and driving,
Yeah.
done something out of the addiction, but there's something underlying it that's kind of fueling their use.
Yeah. Yeah, so that comorbidity is one of the ways that you can actually see what may be going on with the person a little bit further. When you see those things happening, recognize there may be something else attached to that. And I remember working at when I was working at Bowie State University, and I was working at the Drug Prevention Center. And when I would have conversations with a lot of students around, especially marijuana use, and they're just very dismissive of the use of it. And we got a little bit deeper into it. They recognized that there were other things that were attached to it that may have been contributing to how often they were using.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then, you go a little bit further into, you can see, oh, there may be a personality disorder in there,
Yeah.
or, even depression or anxiety, or, something else. But there's often other, the drinking and the smoking and the drug use is often a symptom of a deeper issue,
Hmm.
right? So when we think about these different personality disorders, I just want to read off a list of some of the common traits of the
Okay.
cluster Bs, right?
Hmm.
So we have dramatic, overly emotional or erratic behaviors. So we love to talk about the emotional dysregulation of people on Kings of the Heart a lot. You also have difficulty maintaining healthy and stable relationships. So you can look at your partner and look at their history, whether it's romantic or even with friends and family, and see
Hmm.
that instability and recognize there may be a little bit more going on there. Traits that cause distress and impairment among those who are affected. So, they may be distressed a lot. They may have struggles in other areas and being able to function properly, like it was mentioned earlier. Impulsive behaviors or self-destructive tendencies is a major one. Challenges finding effective treatment options, because often it goes undiagnosed. And like we already mentioned, a lot of times for people who are suffering from a personality disorder, they don't see it for themselves. And you can explain it to them and they still don't see it because, it's a personality disorder.
Hmm.
And I also already mentioned possible co-occurring mental health conditions. And so, when you look at it from a broad sense, particularly the emotional dysregulation, how does that actually play a role for you as a person who is trying to deal with someone or manage that kind of relationship? How does those moments of emotional dysregulation impact the daily interactions that you have with your mate?
Oh, it impacts it so much because when you're in a space with a person that has emotional dysregulation, it's so difficult for you to feel a sense of stability and a
Hmm.
sense of security at
Hmm.
times. When
Right.
you cannot predict whether or not your partner is going to wake up on the right side of the bed or the wrong side of the bed, it puts you on eggshells.
Oh yeah.
And you may not even realize it, but you're internally bracing for impact in a way that causes you to have low grade anxiety sometimes.
Yes.
And if you really sit with it and think about it, you may find that you're actually preempting some of the mood swings. And it
Mhm.
starts to really cause you to take these emotional detours in the relationship to avoid what you predict will be blow ups or
Hmm.
shutdowns.
Hmm. Yes, I think, Weenie, you hit it right on the head. I think the one of the biggest impacts is that feeling of unpredictability.
Yeah,
Um, that someone who struggles with emotional regulation, they can go from 0 to 100 in a heartbeat,
yeah,
and you might not necessarily see the trigger, but they've taken it there, and it's hard to bring them back. It's hard to engage because it's not rational.
yeah.
And so, as you said, I think it leads to a space where it just does not feel emotionally safe in the relationship, and you're hyper vigilant and always on guard. As you said, trying to preempt the explosions and trying to figure out just how to manage the day. Oftentimes,
Yeah. When I think about the clients I've seen who maybe on an individual basis who are dealing with someone who may have some of these symptoms, and we're going to get more deeply into the individual symptoms. When they're dealing with somebody at home with that, it seems like the biggest problem that they're bringing to session is, what do I how do I communicate with them? What do I do
mm,
to not set them off? You talked about the walking on eggshells, and if they're not feeling safe to be able to communicate with them when they're having an issue, because it may set them off because the other person is displaying these unstable conditions, they are often left wondering, okay, so what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to communicate with them
Mhm.
if they don't want to, if they're not willing to hear me?
Mhm.
And that's one of the biggest things that comes across my couch is are people who just have a hard time being able to figure out how to communicate with someone who may be suffering from a undiagnosed, especially an undiagnosed personality disorder, right? And so we want to break that down too. We want to try to help you figure out some of these issues that you may be having with someone who's having, these issues. So let's go into the specifics first. All right. So let's start off with borderline personality disorder. That's one that I don't know. For me, for some reason, it seems like I I, I don't see it very often in session, but when I do see it, it's almost like, okay, that's what's going on here. And I know
Mm-hmm.
when it does come across, it's often hard to figure out how do I deal with the personality disorder, specifically the borderline personality disorder, within the couple's context. It's really hard to try and manage both. You see it going on, and you don't want to, come after one person like, okay, there's something really wrong with you, and but there's something there that you want to be able to pull out so that the other person understands it's not all on them, and the person who's suffering from the personality disorder can take a little bit more accountability for what they're doing. But it's really hard to get into that.
Yeah, I think borderline personalities are among the most challenging
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
deal with in the room in session, but certainly I can imagine living with one
Oh my
would
gosh.
be nightmarish. And I want to point out that it's really characterized, like the hallmark of borderline are the extremes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Like, 1 minute, like, I'm all deep in love with you, and the next minute, like, you are the worst person in the world.
Right.
Very externalizing, kinda blaming other people, for their issues, and just, like, the highs and lows are huge. So I think it can be, maybe even co-occurring with, bipolar, but I think it can
Right.
be, mistaken, for the but what's most notable about borderline is the absolute extremes in terms of engagement. You might if you're in relationship with someone, like, you might feel like they're always pushing and pulling,
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, either, like, really, really close or they can't stand you, that kind of fear of abandonment and rejection. So I'm going to reject and push you away first,
Right.
and in some very, very extreme ways.
That was a great, realistic definition for those who are listening to help you get a sense of what you should be looking for. And if
Hmm.
it resonates with you, your ears perk up a little bit at this moment when we talk about how it might show up in your bedroom or how it might show up in your living room. And the key to potentially working with a couple that's experiencing that is to set some limits.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes the word limit or boundary is a curse word in some people's mind
Mhm.
because it feels like it doesn't necessarily correspond with loving a person intimately and unconditionally. But limits and boundaries are actually an act of love, an act of supreme love. And in situations like this, when you have undiagnosed or diagnosed borderline personality disorder in your space, you have to be able to set those limits to help your partner know that those extremes aren't necessarily appropriate to spill over into every facet of your day, your life, your interactions, because you won't be able to survive them long term.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think
Mhm.
one of the reasons why you have people who struggle with that, why boundaries is a curse word for some people who may be suffering from borderline personality disorder, is for what Anisha was saying. If they're struggling with issues of abandonment, if they believe that you're going to leave them at some point, and one of the reasons why they do the push and the pull is because of that. Well, setting a boundary can feel like you're actually
Yeah.
separating from me.
Yeah.
You're pulling yourself
Absolutely.
away from me. You're actually going to leave me because you're telling me that I can't have all this access to you. And so that can be a very painful idea that, okay, well, you're saying that they need to set a boundary with me. Well, if they do that, then where does that leave me? I don't have access to them anymore.
Mhm.
And
Right.
it's trying to help them understand that when someone sets a boundary with you, it's not saying that they're cutting you off, but it's really beginning to understand that they are just limiting, or they are regulating how much access you have to them and different
Mhm.
things, right?
Mhm.
So that they can continue to love you long term.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
Because if you deplete my account early in the process, I have nothing left to give you.
Right.
I'm regulating so that I always have something left to give you, no
Right.
matter how long it takes.
Yep.
Yes. And I would definitely suggest, if you're in a relationship with someone and sh who, as Tariq said, has, a diagnosed personality disorder or undiagnosed, the boundaries are important and should be structured before you have the blow up,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
when you all are in kind of a quiet, calmer moment, that's when you bring it up and say, listen, there are times when, things go a little left.
Mm-hmm.
So I need you to know that when you say this or when you do this, that's when I'm going to, kind of take my leave and I'm going to say, and whatever it is you're going to say, and I'm just going to remove myself from the situation or whatever the decision is. But you bring it up when things are not like on 10
Right.
so that you can kind of have a calmer conversation. What I find for a lot of people is they don't want to bring it up, right? They're walking the eggshells and things are kind of calm right now. So I don't want to steer us in that direction.
Yeah.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
better way to do it is when things are calmer to go ahead and, steer into the curve and take it on to set some boundaries in a calmer space so that once, you guys are on 10, it's going squirrely, you kind of refer back to that moment.
Yep. I agree. All right. So real quick, I just want to go through some of the main symptoms of borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
Okay. So we have first intense fears of abandonment, either real or imagined, impulsive tendencies that can be harmful or damaging, sensitivity to environmental circumstances, unstable and intense relationships. That intensity is key. Unstable sense of self or identity issues, feelings of emptiness, angry outbursts and difficulty managing anger, anxiety or depressive symptoms, severe dissociative symptoms, dramatic shifts in perception of situations and people, as just mentioned, and then reoccurring self harm and suicidal attempts. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Oh, you hit it.
Yeah.
All of
You know,
that.
and so the ones that I think we've already mentioned that I really want to kind of point out, because I think it plays such a major role in how people are responding when they have borderline personality disorder, is that sense of abandonment.
Hmm.
Is that sense of abandonment? It's like almost everything else that I just mentioned kind of branches off of that in some way. So part of the reason why you're having these major outbursts is out of the fear that that the person's going to leave. So again, part of that push and pull mechanism. The anxiety and depressive symptoms also play, can be seen coming from that. I'm anxious because I don't know where this is going to lead. I feel depressed because, again, I don't think that this is going the way that I want it to go. There this again, these symptoms I think all come out of that sense of abandonment, and even overall instability of the relationships.
Mhm.
Is that.
Hmm.
But I also want to focus on the intensity. One of the things that when you think about somebody who has borderline personality disorder, the thing that even attracts people who aren't aware that the person is suffering from this disorder is that sense of intensity. Right?
Mhm.
There's something that's very
Yeah.
appealing about how intense they're
Yes.
loving you and how much attention they're giving you. And we
Yes.
can get into the love bombing thing when we get into narcissism.
Narcissism.
But again, they're very, very intense and can be very appealing. And another thing that I've recognized, and I've seen research on this before. A lot of people with these different personality disorders, particularly the borderline personality disorder, can be very, very creative, can be very, very intelligent.
Mhm.
And that again is a draw. And so here you are, you're pulled in by what you see as being just appealing traits of someone that you want to be with. But then you get into a little bit further and recognize the traits are actually part of the disorder themselves.
Mhm.
That's spot on. The idea that some folks with the personality disorders are just brilliant. They are absolutely
Mhm. Mhm.
brilliant and passionate,
Yeah.
and you're attracted to how deeply they dive into most things in life, whether it's a craft, a hobby, their career, or your relationship with them. That draw definitely secures the relationship before you can sometimes identify some of the other symptoms that you've mentioned.
Hmm.
And when you're deeply ensconced in the relationship, it becomes that much harder to pull apart the pieces that really work and the parts that you love from the parts that are very dangerous or toxic.
Yes. I think, as you said, one of the things that's so attractive about borderlines that I've seen, they're willing to be very vulnerable. Like their emotions are just kind of
Yeah.
right there and accessible.
Right.
And, maybe for someone who is not as open, like that's attractive to have somebody who's just kind of that free, and expressive. And certainly if they're attracted to you and they're giving you lots of attention. That can
Yes.
be very intoxicating almost. And so I think I can totally see what you're saying and agree that some of those same symptoms
Hmm.
um, at first can be really attractive.
Hmm.
So I have to throw in here that, every time we're on, I typically make a plug for dating somebody through all four seasons of the year at
Hmm.
minimum before
Yes.
you level up, because uh, that honeymoon or limerence phase, as we call it clinically, it all looks and feels the same in the
Mhm,
Right.
beginning. The
mhm,
intensity is welcomed, the
mhm.
passion is welcomed, and your curiosity can get the best of you, and you start thinking, this is wonderful, I want more, more, more of this. But when you actually wait it out, some of those symptoms may start to surface to help you see that the intensity is not just limited to positive elements of the relationship.
For sure.
It starts to spill over into other parts of their life and their daily
Yes.
functioning in ways that would help you to know, okay, this isn't exactly what I thought it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really important what you're saying, Lena, about time, because that's really what distinguishes a personality disorder from just kind of your ordinary everyday variety of relationship issues,
Yes.
right? Or a mood disorder.
Mm.
Depression, you might be depressed for a while, but it'll resolve.
Yes.
Um, a personality disorder is persistent
Yeah.
and it's over time. And so you won't see it unless you're with someone over time and can see them in multiple different situations and settings,
Hmm.
and go through some things with them to see how they manage it.
And I think the other part of that too is it's inconsistent. Going back to seeing the things that attracted you to them in the first place, those things will pop in and out along with
Mhm,
their attitudes and their emotional dysregulation.
mhm,
It's not consistent. So you'll have times where you're seeing hey, they're everything that they present to you up front is there again, and it filters into some of the other times where they're not, being as or well their personality disorder is actually showing up some more, right? So it's very inconsistent. So it's like in and out, in and out. Is this person who I thought they were, or is there something else that's being presented here that I need to be concerned about? And it's hard to kind of keep track of it because you're constantly like, okay, well, yeah, I love all these other qualities, but this other stuff just doesn't make any sense.
yeah, and what you're saying right now reminds me very much of the cycle of abuse,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
As you're saying, domestic
Mhm.
violence awareness month, there is that cycle, like that kind of that honeymoon, and things are really intense and really great, but then things, kind of sour, go bad. I apologize, I'll never do that again, and we're back into it.
Mhm.
That fluctuation is definitely present in borderline relationships for sure. Like as
Yeah.
much as they are into you and love you, the next minute you do something wrong and you're the worst person. Like they hate you, there's nothing about you that they like.
Yep. You're the
And
worst person
so
in the world.
yes, yes.
Yep. And so let's go ahead and get into the next one. Histrionic personality disorder. So some of the signs and symptoms for this one is, let's see. The first is feeling uncomfortable or unappreciated when they're not the center of attention. So that's a
Mhm.
major one, wanting to be the center of attention. Interacting in inappropriate sexual or provocative ways with others based on the cultural context, such as at work. Having rapid shifts and a shallow expression of emotions. Using their appearance to attract attention. Exaggerating and dramatizing expressions. Being easily influenced by people and circumstances. And believing their relationships are more personal or intimate than they truly are.
Mhm.
Right. And so, right there, again, there are going to be qualities that may be very appealing to you,
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, the histrionic person, like, this person is the life of the party.
Hmm.
They walk into a room and you know immediately that they're there.
Right.
Their appearance is everything is just kind of over the top, and that's very magnetic.
Hmm.
And they can draw you in, with just the force of their personality, and that need to be the center of attention is so strong, that they're very attuned to their environment and will dial it up and do what's necessary to keep all eyes on them. But
Right.
it's very attractive.
And that sexualized piece, that piece is very important because
Hmm.
when you lead with that, a person whose, let's say, love language may be physical touch and they're deeply into physical intimacy will see that and think, oh my God, I finally found someone who is uninhibited,
Mhm,
someone who, kind of just leads with their sexuality. And you can get caught on that piece without knowing that everything else comes along with it.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
When it comes to the histrionic, the thing that I like to really focus on outside of the sexual piece is the over dramatized emotional expressions, right?
mhm,
Again, it's about trying to maintain that attention. And as someone who is dating or in a relationship or married to someone who is histrionic, it's hard for you to sometimes distinguish when because they'll justify their behavior each and every time. It's hard for you to distinguish between when they're just, literally just being the life of the party just for the sake of, hey, this is who they are, versus wanting the attention. They're doing it because they want the attention. Your attention isn't going to ever be enough. And so
Mhm.
them being the life of the party isn't just them having a good time, but they're
mhm.
doing it to actually, gain
Feed
everyone's
a
attention.
supply. You
Right,
Yes,
need it, like you
right.
yes,
need a supply that feeds you like gas in a tank makes a
mhm,
Right.
person go, right?
Yep.
But
yes,
the tank is a well that has no bottom.
None at
yes.
all.
And again, I think it's important for people to realize we're talking about extremes, to,
Right.
to meet the diagnosis for personality disorder. We're talking about more of the extreme and in its extreme form. Histrionics want the attention so bad that they will create it. They will make stuff
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Yes.
right,
You know what I mean?
right.
They will make drama. And it's hard to be in a relationship with someone like that because, um, they can potentially feel like it's competition. So let's say you have a moment and everybody's hyping you up because you've accomplished something at work or done something, and instead of really being excited for you, your histrionic partner will see that as competition.
Right.
Like it's supposed to be about me. And that can feel horrible.
Yes.
Um, and just the manipulation of the environment, like you will see them dial it up to make sure that you stay kind of in the background, and that's
Mhm.
that's very painful.
Yeah, one of the things I see with histrionic people are when you begin to share a story with them, your own story, your own situation, they have to one up you. Oh, let me
Mm,
tell
Yes.
you about a time this happened to me. And so it's no longer about you. So even though
mhm,
you may be bringing something to them, for them, okay, well, that's fine. That's cute. But let me tell you what happened to me. And there's
mhm,
always something more. They may embellish the hell of it out of a story to
mhm,
just seem like whatever they're going through or whatever they've gone through is so much, grander than yours.
mhm,
And when you see that, it's like, okay, why am I even bother talking here? because now it's not about me at all. It's all about you, and it's consistent. You see that constantly with someone who's histrionic, and part of that too is the making up of stories. Like Anisha said, they will create the scenario where the attention will come back to them. So they are going to create stories. They are going to, you know, their emotions will take over the scene. Like they may trip or bump their leg or do something to make
Mhm.
sure that the attention's always coming back to them.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
I want to throw in there one of the last criteria that you mentioned, which was perceiving that personal relationships are deeper than they are,
Oh
Mm.
because
yeah.
that comes up in the storytelling a lot.
Mhm.
You'll pick up on the fact that they have such a close relationship with so and so, or they believe that a colleague is their work wife or work husband, and
Hmm.
that colleague really barely speaks to them at the
Mhm.
water cooler.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
when they tell the story, or when they get into a situation, they will misjudge or miscalculate how deep or personal that relationship is, and that in itself can cause drama when a confrontation occurs around that.
Yep.
Yes. Mhm.
Yep. For
Mhm.
sure. All right. So let's get into another one. It's that antisocial personality disorder. This one, when you think about the DSM-4, I think they were qualified as antisocial personality, not antisocial, I'm sorry, psychopathic and
Sociopathic.
Sociopath.
sociopathic, right?
Socio.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Right. So if people called you a sociopath or a psychopath back in the day, now they're calling you antisocial. All right. And so some of the symptoms, signs and symptoms for that are deceitful and manipulative tendencies, aggression towards animal and people. So if you see people, often kicking dogs or chasing ants with magnifying glasses, give you an idea about that.
Yeah, it was big red flags.
Big red flag, right? Destruction of property or belongings, frequent breaking of rules and laws. They have no respect for laws or rules, no boundaries at all. Tendency to lie or con others, irritability or aggressive argumentativeness, disregard for safety, lack of responsibility, meaning they're not taking accountability for none of this. Placing blame on others for your actions, again, no accountability, and lack of empathy for others. That's a major one right
That's a
there.
big
Yeah,
one.
that is. That
Hmm.
is.
Right.
That is.
Hmm. And so, what are some of these symptoms that you see that comes across in session that is a red flag for you?
This is tough because I would hope that I don't run into socio and psychopaths on a regular basis in the practice,
Right.
but it so closely mirrors some of the narcissistic tendencies
Yeah.
Yeah.
that I would say that I treat more of that. And on all of these, there's a spectrum, right? So, the lack of empathy is something that we work with quite often.
Right. For
The
sure.
inability to accept responsibility or be accountable, the blame shifting, it's
Mhm.
always someone else's fault, the manipulation, deceit, and dishonesty.
Hmm.
Those things show up more readily, particularly when you're doing relationship counseling or when you're doing individual counseling. But it's often harder to see if someone is engaging in hurting animals,
Right.
destroying property. Those are things that start at a very early age in
Mhm.
antisocial personality disorder. But unless they're presenting a scenario to you where you can actually pull it out, it might not be something that you can pick up on all the time. Unless a partner of theirs observes it and
Right.
shares with you that they're seeing destruction of property, they're seeing some more of the abusive, um, you mentioned a disregard for the law. You'll see, of course, folks going to jail, breaking rules, things like that. But it takes a little bit more to string together these symptoms to point out this person has antisocial personality disorder, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people, it doesn't come across as antisocial behavior to them as the mate, because oftentimes, even though you may be the victim of some of this stuff, you don't see it that way. You often see them doing it to other people.
Mhm.
You are much more aware of their behavior and how they are treating other people. To
Hmm.
you, again, because of the relationship that you're in, they may be a lot more affectionate towards you. They may be a lot more, you know, I don't want to say apologetic because, again, that's not going to be part of their personality, but they could be much more in tune with you. But those behaviors are often seen outside of the relationship, so the hurting of animals, obviously, but other people, the disregard for laws and rules, the with the lack of empathy, of course, you're going to be a victim of. But a lot of those things is hard for you to see, as happening to you, but you can pick up on them, right?
Yeah, I think I think you can see it though in some ways, especially because if it's a true personality disorder, it's persistent, and that
Mhm.
lack of empathy you will
Hmm.
feel,
Yes.
Yeah,
especially when and mostly it's when there's conflict, like when you're not aligned, like that person will be okay and be able to kind of love on you when it suits them.
right.
But if you do something that they don't like, you will feel like the coldness. Like you said, that they won't accept responsibility. They'll put it on you. And just that lack of care and concern.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And you will see it show up in, I'm going to say, because this one we don't talk a lot about, but like financial abuse,
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
cutting corners, um, going into your wallet and taking out your credit card and using it without your permission, or
Hmm.
just other ways, just kind of sneakily doing things behind your back. They might not be major scale, but the way that they just don't respect boundaries,
Yes.
or rules, even within the relationship, I
Mhm.
think is what is the indicators, even if you don't see the bigger things.
Right. Right. And that the lying. And that's another one too, that
Yeah,
lying or conning people.
yeah,
I think that kind of goes right into blaming others.
yeah.
So if I lie to you or if I do something to, con you
Mhm,
and you call me out on it, well, it's not my fault, it's your fault. You should have known better.
Oh, it's so tough because it can cause you to question your own reality
yeah,
because they're so smooth with it.
mhm,
Right.
A person with antisocial personality disorder is surgical with the way they switch stories, with the way they switch from being normal to cold. I love
mhm,
that you use that word, Anisha, because
Mhm.
that coldness is something that'll resonate in your spirit and you go, this is really withdrawn.
mm,
This is really cold. You really don't care
mhm,
Right.
about
mhm.
this person's safety or how much this hurt somebody or something. And that should probably stand out to you how smoothly and cleanly they can detach from a situation or a person. Those are
Right.
all characteristics that can make you go, hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, they're running through friends. Like, today this is your best friend, tomorrow, oh, I don't know them. I don't deal with them. They're yeah, that lack of care or deep care. They care for the moment as long as it suits them.
Yes.
But as soon as they get what they need and you're no longer providing that or you've provided enough of it, they're going to be gone.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lack of depth in their relationships. They're not really trying to connect deeply, but just far enough that they can, manipulate you and get what they need out of that situation. Right.
Yes, in the sense that there's, like, no real moral compass
Right. Yeah.
beyond
That's exactly
their
what it is.
own wants or needs.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
There's a sense that there's no low.
Hmm.
They won't go if it suits, their purpose or their need.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. And then we have one more, and this is the big one. This is one that we hear all the time,
Mhm.
and that's the narcissistic personality disorder. Right. And so
Yes.
here are some of the signs and symptoms so that we can be clear and that not everybody is a narcissist, but here are some very specific signs and symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. So, first, let's start off with grandiosity or exaggeration, preoccupation with fantasies of great love, power, or success, a sense of entitlement is a big one, a need for excessive and admiration from others, So they need that adoration, admiration from other people. Beliefs of being special and needing to only associate with other high status people. Exploitation of others.
Mhm.
Again, a lack of empathy. And I think that's one of the reasons why everyone gets called as a narcissist is because of that lack of empathy, but
Yeah.
it could be something else. Envy of others, arrogant behaviors or attitudes, that fake confidence, and an overestimation of achievements and abilities. Right. So those are some common
Mhm.
um, signs that someone may be dealing with narcissistic personality disorder. Right.
Yeah.
And so, what are some key ones in there that again play a role in some of the relationship issues that people are having?
Go ahead, Weena.
Well, we talked about the love bombing. We said we would come back to it.
Hmm.
And one of the things that often happens is you won't quite be able to tell that a person is narcissistic straight off because there is an intensity. They're studying you to kind of get in lockstep with you, to know what you like. They appear to be so similar to you
Yeah.
that you think, oh my God, this is my soulmate.
Yep.
And you won't even realize that they're actually just listening to who you are, what you like, what you do, and mimicking and mirroring back that to you, and literally investigating ways that they can make you feel secure in the relationship and kind of get you hooked. And that's the first stage of their performance. And in the second stage, you're going to start to see this detachment. They're going to basically tear down everything that they built up, and it'll be like a switch has flipped off, and you wonder where the knight in shining armor or the perfect angel went, because all of a sudden they're very, very different, and that lack of empathy starts to show up.
Mhm.
Sometimes the grandiosity shows through a bit more in condescension toward you and other people around. You'll start to hear them kind of tear down other people now that they have you in the comfort or the privacy of, their space. And that part is very important. I also want to note here that there's a difference between like your garden variety narcissist and your covert narcissist, which is
Mm.
a person who doesn't necessarily show up with that big charismatic personality. They mask their grandiosity and their sense of entitlement by acting more like a humble
Mm.
martyr.
That's a good one.
And that's really important
Yeah.
because you have to look very differently at a covert narcissist. The symptoms are and the side effects are still there of the behavior, but you gotta kind of know that the mask that they're wearing now also has this sheen to it that looks like, nope, I'm just a humble woman, a humble guy. They come across as if they are not seeking attention. In fact, it will appear that, they could care less about it. But then in other ways, you'll notice that they're still envious and competitive toward you. And
Hmm.
it'll be really confusing
Mhm.
because they put on the persona that they're not, but they really are.
Mhm. I think that one of the ways in which what people are mostly focused on and how narcissism has become like the buzzword, like you
Hmm.
think we're just flooded with narcissists, is the self-focus,
Yeah.
Mm.
right? Like that sense that the world revolves around me. And so a lot of times people will, if they're in relationship with someone who just seems to be about themselves, they'll say, "Oh, you're a narcissist."
Right.
But that's really what has allowed it to proliferate. The that self-focus, the lack of empathy, the lack of accountability,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like you were talking about, the manipulation to uh, get what they want.
Yeah.
It's like you're the object. If you are the object of their attention, it's for acquisition almost. It's to
Yes.
boost them. And once they feel like they have you and gotten what they need, you
They don't want anything to do with you.
no, no,
Right.
they'll be fine to kind of rip you down,
Sabotage.
and yes, and to push
Mhm.
you down so that they can be elevated.
Right. And I know that for a lot of people who are suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, for them, again, it's hard for them to ever see that about themselves because
Ooh,
they believe their lies. They believe these things
yes.
about themselves. They believe the attention is going to, really distinguish them from everybody else. That
Mhm.
okay, well, they love me, so what's your problem?
Yeah.
I'm getting all this positive feedback from people because of my charm, because of my wit, because of how I connect with people, and the attention that I give them. And again, like you said, I am mirroring, for a lot of people their behavior, and so yeah, I seem very appealing. So, if they all love me and you don't, then the problem must be you.
Yes.
And so for a lot of people, I'm sorry, go ahead, Nisha.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I wasn't trying to interrupt you, but I think, kind of piggybacking what you're saying, there's really no accountability
Right.
for a person with narcissistic personality disorder.
Hmm.
You're not going to get an apology for them. They're not
Yes.
going to say, I see what you're saying and I need to change. They're just not.
Right.
They don't see it that way. So you might end up with a partner, they might come in for couples therapy. They're not going to take in anything that is them. It'll all be kind of focused on outwardly on
Right.
their partner.
Right.
Yeah. The other piece that's important is that they really can't see the world outside of their purview.
Yeah.
No.
So if they think that something is horrendous, everybody should think that something is horrendous.
Hmm.
If they think that their behavior is acceptable, then everybody else should think that their behavior is acceptable.
Right.
And it's very difficult, as you said, Anisha, to get them to see any different perspective. And that's a telltale sign when you're in an argument with them that they're constantly pulling you back to their worldview or their perspective. And it's extremely difficult to have any empathy in those moments for the ways that they may have hurt you or done something wrong.
Right.
That's where the victimization comes out. And the story kind of always starts with what someone else did to them,
Mhm.
or if they did something wrong and they kind of can feel that everybody thinks they've done something wrong, then they figure out a way to actually tell the story from the perspective of something that happened to them that
Mhm.
caused them to react the way that they
Yes.
did. And so you'll get into these circular conversations with them that typically don't have an end.
Hmm.
And you'll come into a conversation hoping to get some apology or just some validation. And if you find that the conversation somehow switches to now you being the bad girl or the bad guy, and them having a laundry list of things that you have done, there's defensiveness, blame shifting, and gaslighting,
Yep.
Gaslighting, that's
where
the
Yeah.
one.
That's the one. Right.
where
Yes.
you're like, no, I really do think you went into the bank account and you took all of the money out of the joint bank account without talking to me. And they'll go, no, I didn't. You told me that I could do that.
Right.
And you'll go, what? And they're like, yeah, you told me I could do that. And they will hold to the story in a way that causes you to walk away scratching your head like,
Mhm.
what just happened?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know so I know we got to wrap up soon, so I just want people to hear from you. What are some ways, if you do find that you're in a relationship with someone who has a personality disorder, if you're married to one and you don't see a quick exit strategy, what are some ways that you can actually manage that relationship so that you're not constantly the victim of their emotional dysregulation? How can you actually better manage being in a relationship with somebody?
Counter community. Counter
Mm.
community is a community that you build around you that helps to validate your experience and provide support in ways that that partner is just not going to be able to.
Mhm.
Mhm.
One of the things that is really prevalent through the personality disorders that are in the cluster B is manipulation.
Right.
Whether it's, trying to get folks to give you attention or lying, being deceitful, that manipulation, when it when you come in contact with it, it can literally make you think that you're going crazy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's really important not to have folks who can't see objectively when you're wrong, because we're always contributing to dynamics in relationships. We're not
Hmm.
perfect, but you
Right.
do need people in your corner who you can confide in, who can just give you a dose of reality
Yeah.
sometimes to say,
Yeah.
"Hey, no, you're not crazy. This is awful what's going on, and we're here to validate you
Mhm.
Mhm.
through
Mhm.
some of the harder moments in the relationship."
Yes.
Right.
I think it's important, to note for people that when we're talking about saying like, th there has to be a line, like, if we're talking about physical safety
Yeah.
and sometimes emotional safety, that you do have to sometimes really evaluate whether you should stay or not,
Right.
right? And so if it's not safe, if it's physically unsafe, you shouldn't continue to stay in that relationship and reach out for resources to help you find a way to safely exit. But I think if you want to stay and we're taking physical safety off the table,
Right.
then I agree with Weena that, having a sense of community around you, friends who pour into you, who you can vent to, who can help you stay grounded in reality about what's going on, but also therapy for yourself. If they won't go to therapy for themselves, make
Hmm.
sure you're investing for yourself
Yes.
individually in how to just kind of manage so that you are not getting to broken spaces in trying to continue to walk on eggshells around your partner who won't acknowledge and get treatment for what they're bringing to the table.
Right. I think, when you some of the other major things that I don't know if we really got too deep into them, but when you think about these personality disorders, is the insecurity.
Mm,
For a lot of people who are suffering from these different personality disorders, there is a lot of insecurity, a lot of self doubt, a lack of self esteem that's actually coming through in terms
yes.
of this grandiosity. They're trying to they're again they're masked. They are trying to present themselves in a way that they don't really even truly see themselves, even though they believe everything that they're hearing. It's a crazy dynamic.
Hmm.
Nonetheless, there's a lack of security there, and also a lot of jealousy, right? So they're jealous of other people. So when we start talking about the things that you may need to do to insulate yourself from their behavior, it's going to seem very scary to them. So one of the things I'm thinking of course, we talked about boundaries and establishing healthy boundaries with these people, making sure that they are not just running over you all the time, that they don't just have access to every ounce of your life,
Hmm.
that you're regulating how much access they have to you. Then, if you are actually trying to make sure that you have a life outside of them, know that that's going to be very scary for them because they can't control you,
Yeah.
right? And I think that goes back into the community aspect that we was talking about.
Hmm.
And so, even though you're doing these things, recognize for them, they're going to be scared by it. They are going to try to fight against it, but you have to maintain a sense of strength. Yeah. So you may have to say, look, I need this. If not, I have to go.
Yeah.
Right. I need to be able to go and spend time with my friends, with my family. I need to go be a part of my community. You don't have to say that I'm doing it to isolate or to insulate myself from you, but I do need this.
Hmm.
And so making sure that you're not only setting boundaries, but you're also setting expectations for what you need in a relationship. Whether it's their behavior and them making sure that they're doing something different, and that it's not appropriate for them to yell at you, to throw things, to go off and be that abusive person that you're appearing to be. That's not appropriate. That you have to start setting some expectations of behavior, and also expectations of how you want to be able to show up in the relationship. Without that, again, you're going to have a lot of your own concerns not being met. So that has to play a part too in what you're doing, right?
Hmm.
So look, we can go on and on with this conversation. We have to actually head on out. So I want to get some quick noble truths, some quick boiler points from you guys on how do you deal with someone with personality disorders in your own estimation.
Like I said, boundaries, limits, counter community, can't go wrong with that. And lastly, educate yourself on the personality disorder as much as you can. Read as much as you can, talk to a therapist so that you can be prepared for the symptoms that might be coming your way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say self-care is not selfish, and that you need to make sure that you are prioritizing your needs emotionally, spiritually, physically as well. If you're dealing with a relationship that can be draining, to make sure that you find ways to pour back into you and that you create safe spaces for yourself if your relationship doesn't always feel emotionally safe.
Right. And I'm gonna just go with what John and I were talking about a couple episodes back. Look, if you gotta go, you gotta go. All right. Don't stick around and take the abuse if this is not working for you. You know, be willing to sacrifice, be willing to step away, be willing to take care of yourself if that's what it means, you know, for you to actually get out of the relationship. Take care of yourself, you know, that's what we have to focus on. So, any which way, look, I want to thank you guys for coming and joining us today on the Kings of the Heart podcast. Weena, where can people find out more about you?
You can find me on my website, covenanttherapy.com, or follow me at Weena Wise on Instagram.
All right. And Anisha, what about you? Where can people find out more about how to contact you and what you got going on?
Growthpointtherapy.com.
No, nice and simple. And
Yeah.
I guess for me, it is, you can just find me right here on kingsoftheheart.com, as well as at TyreekOmariWalton.com, and all the different streaming platforms. Just put in my name, Tyreek Omari Walton. All right. Thank you, everybody. Really enjoyed my time with you. Look forward to seeing you again. You will be seeing these ladies again as the Royal Cypher. Hopefully, Dr. John, once he gets better, he'll be here with us, and the crew will be all together, and we'll be doing it together. So you guys all take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.